Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and it's Friday. Time for the quarterback, tight end, and defensive rankings for week 11. We're intended for half PPR, but obviously quarterback and defense, those are a bit more nuanced based on your league. Like, for instance, I have 300-yard bonuses in the subscriber league. But as always, we begin with the players unranked, and at quarterback, they're mostly on bye. It's Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Daniel Jones, and Bryce Young who are out on bye this week. But similar to last week, Dak Prescott will be out on IR for the rest of the season. Trevor Lawrence might return after the bye in week 12, but for now, inactive Mac Jones gets the start once again. So let us begin. We have Josh Allen as my number one quarterback in week 11. And at first I was like, I'm not going to rank him number one. It's the Chiefs without Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid also out. I think Amari Cooper will be a game time decision who probably plays, but still not ideal circumstances against an elite defense. But then I looked into the numbers against the Chiefs and holy shit, I have to put Josh Allen here at number one. On Thursday, I did rank Jalen Hurts at number one, but then I looked into it last night. In his last 5 games versus the Chiefs, including the playoff games, Josh Allen averages 30 points per game, 278 yards per game, 12 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 53 rushing yards, and 4 rushing touchdowns in that span. And knowing they have the bye after this game, I can't imagine they don't let him loose. Like, especially with some receivers missing. Don't you think he runs it a bit more than he has been this season? They've stepped it back a lot in that department. Maybe not in terms of total yards. This season, he's on pace for 26 rushing yards per game, but only 7 rushing touchdowns. Last year, he ran for 31 rushing yards per game, so only 5 more, but 15 rushing touchdowns. That means this season, he's on pace for less than half than last year with 15. So that is a big reason why he's just not as elite in fantasy. He has been stepping back a bit lately. An average of 19.8 points per game is still quarterback 4 in the last 4 games. But for a long time, he hadn't had any interceptions, and in the last 3 weeks, he has thrown 4 of them. So I do think he turns it over this week. I do think that is a factor, but I really think they need him to go crazy in order to win. And although he hasn't done that much this season, I do think this week he will step up. So start Josh Allen. It might as well be a playoff game for them. It's their only shot to have any home field advantage at the end of the year. And even then, it's not guaranteed. So must win. I at least think they compete and keep it close. I'm going with Josh Allen at number one. But to be fair, I did rank Jalen Hurts at number one. Entering Thursday night, I did think he would have the best game because he's been the best quarterback the last month. He has 8 rushing touchdowns entering last night's game. He adds another one with 6 passing touchdowns over just the last 4 games. Since the bye, he has been insane. The quarterback won with 29.4 points per game on average. So no one was benching him. He maybe didn't put up his best game last night with about 19 points. He's probably not the quarterback one this week. But the opposite trend is happening for Hurts. Last season, he also had 15 rushing touchdowns, and this season he's on pace for 19 of them. Saquon's presence on the field has not taken away the tush push on the goal line. Jalen Hurts is elite. Number 3, I have Brock Purdy versus Seattle, who kind of owns this matchup against the Seahawks. In Purdy's last 5 games versus Seattle, including the playoffs, he has an average of 21 points per game, 276 yards per game, 11 touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown, only 2 interceptions, and an extra 8 rushing yards in those games. So on top of that, Purdy is the quarterback 3 over the last 4 games. He's been lights out lately, an average of 22.8 points per game, thanks to 270 through the air, along with 30 rushing yards per game. His rushing contributions have really bolstered his floor with 6 touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns, and only 3 turnovers in the last 4 games. Purdy is a lock in your lineup. Definitely a stud this week. The matchup does rank top 10, and he always owns it. He's undefeated against Seattle. And Ricky Pearsall looks like a steady contributor immediately. Juwan Jennings looks way more reliable than Ayuk this season. Kittle's the best tight end in the NFL this year, and Debo goes over 100 yards every single time he faces Seattle. So now that Christian McCaffrey's back, Purdy also has a pass-catching running back, and that was the only thing missing in this offense. he will dominate. Purdy is a top 3 quarterback this week. At number 4, I got Joe Burrow at the Chargers, and Burrow is just a tick behind Purdy at QB4 in scoring. The last 4 games with 22.7, Purdy has 22.8. So they are toe-to-toe. Obviously, we saw the insane game from both him and Ja'Marr Chase last week against Baltimore, and that was the best matchup overall in the NFL. It's definitely a lot more difficult against the Chargers this week, so that's why I do rank him behind Purdy on Sunday night. I still think he goes off, especially with Chase Brown contributing more in the passing game as their only running back. T. Higgins expected to play. I trust Burrow to pay off. So he's a stud quarterback this season. Maybe he's not as good as Hurts, Allen, and Lamar this year, but in the passing game, he is the only thing they have in the red zone lately. So I trust all the touchdowns to go through him. Joe Burrow is a must start this week. At number 5, I think Jordan Love is a must start, not only in week 11, but rest of season. Last year, if you look at Jordan Love's first season in the NFL, he had a drastically different second half compared to first half. First 9 games of 2023, Love threw 14 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and averaged 16.3 fantasy points per game. This year, in the first 9 games, Jordan Love threw 15 touchdowns and 10 interceptions and averaged 16.5 points per game. The numbers look very similar to last season on a per game basis, which would rank his quarterback 13 in scoring the last 4 weeks. It's not been terrible from Love, but not quite elite, not emblematic of QB5 like where I'm ranking him. But he also got injured and missed 2 of those 9 games. He was not 100% at all, especially in the last time we saw him before the bye against Detroit in the rain. So I think this bye week came at the perfect time, some much needed rest for Jordan Love, and an opportunity to really turn it around and clean it up, especially in the turnover department rest of season. That's what he did last year in the final stretch. He got into a groove in the final 8 games of last year. Jordan Love threw 18 touchdowns with only 1 interception, an average of 21.3 fantasy points per game, which this season would rank his quarterback 5 at the moment, and that is where I rank him this week. Here at number 5, the question is, will Love clean up those turnovers? If he does, then he's going to be great. He also made a jump from 232 passing yards per game up to 269 in the second half last season. This year, he's already averaging 260, and if we see a bump of 30 to 40 yards per game, along with 90% less interceptions, Jordan Love would be about to explode. These last 8 games could be elite from the Green Bay quarterback. So I think he's a great player to acquire. I do think he's a good start this week. And against Chicago, they normally own this matchup. I think it continues. Give me Jordan Love as a top 5 play in week 11. Number 6, I have Lamar Jackson at Pittsburgh, who probably sounds ludicrous to bench, especially for Jordan Love, who's not been great lately. But I genuinely believe that Pittsburgh is as close as we're going to get to his kryptonite. If you look at the last 5 years, there were 10 possible games to reference for data. However, Lamar was inactive in 6 of them. 5 were missed with injury, 1 with COVID, and we only have a 4-game sample size, which doesn't really represent the current Ravens offense. So it's not quite legit, but this is all we have. Here it is, the last 4 games for Lamar versus Pittsburgh. He is averaging 10.5 points per game, 215 yards per game, 4 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 3 fumbles, but an extra 59 rushing yards per game, not a single rushing touchdown. So they really give him problems, and it's been a while since he's been fully healthy. It could look better, but last year he struggled against them, and I think it happens again. The Steelers' defense is very legit this season. TJ Watt going to give him a lot of problems. So I do worry about it. I am definitely downgrading Lamar. I do not think it's his best game of the year. That's why I rank him outside the top 5 at number 6. It could be another 10 fantasy points for Lamar this week. Number 7 in the same game, I think it's more likely a shootout though, and I do think Russell Wilson will play well in fantasy. He's been a top 10 quarterback in his 3 games this season. It's a small sample size, but still he's looked pretty solid. He is giving you 246 yards per game, 7 total touchdowns. 1 of them is on the ground, and only 2 turnovers in those 3 games. And that makes him quarterback 9 with an average of 18.9 points per game. And this week he gets one of the best matchups you can ask for. Number 2, over the last 5 games, Baltimore gives up 24 points per game to quarterbacks, 325 yards per game, 13 touchdowns, and only 3 interceptions. Kyle Hamilton appears to be likely to play, but he is not 100%. He is still questionable for this game. But these divisional rivalries sometimes are very low scoring. If you look at the last 4 years, it's very unlikely we see either team go over 20 points. So maybe I'm giving both of them too much of an upgrade, but the Ravens have just been so bad on defense this year. I think Russ will capitalize. Pickens will not be stopped. He should go over 100 yards. And if Mike Williams steps up, I really like Russell Wilson's ceiling. And I also think Jaylen Warren will contribute a lot in the passing game. So start both Lamar and Russ. I don't think you can bench either of them. Russ gets a massive upgrade. Lamar is too good to bench. At number 8, I think CJ Stroud returns to your lineup this week with Nico Collins returning to the offense. That is kind of all I need to know to at least trust the floor. I don't think Stroud will burn you with Nico back healthy. But in this matchup, it does rank top 3. The Cowboys have been pretty vulnerable to quarterbacks as of late. They rank tied with Baltimore, allowing 24 points per game, but a lot less yards. 234 is about 90 less than the Ravens, but 11 passing touchdowns, only one interception, and 26 rushing yards per game, 3 rushing touchdowns. They give up a lot on the ground. Stroud doesn't always run it, but it is possible he does punch it in on the ground. And if that happens, you're definitely going to be happy to get that extra 2 points. But he should play well. I think in prime time, they get back on track. He's been bad, and with his best weapon back on the field, he will capitalize. So I trust them to win the Battle of Texas. It's an in-state rivalry, and the Cowboys are very weak at the moment. Even if their secondary gets healthy, like even if Deron Bland were to play, I'm not expecting that, but even if it happens, I still think Stroud will be top 10. I think he gets back on track against the Cowboys. It is a top 3 matchup. So start him on Monday. I do trust him, especially with Nico back healthy in a good matchup. He's a top 10 play. At number 9, though, I am starting Justin Herbert in the subscriber league on Sunday night versus the Bengals. As a Chargers fan, I am stoked for Herbert right now, so keep the bias in mind. But he's about to see 2 of the best matchups of the season, and the schedule isn't that tough the rest of the way either. Herbert, in his last 4 games, is averaging 19.5 points, 269 passing yards per game, 5 touchdowns, not a single turnover. You love to see it, along with 23 rushing yards per game and 1 rushing touchdown. That's quarterback 6 in that sample size in scoring. Herbert has been a good play the last 4 weeks. His pass attempts and completions can be under 20 in any given game, but in a close fight with Arizona, he threw for 350 yards with Will Dissly as his number 1 target, and there was also a fumble on the goal line by one of his receivers. So I think he can light up the yard if he needs to, and against the Bengals, he probably will. Thankfully, the Bengals are a top 5 matchup for quarterbacks. They allow 21 points per game over the last 5 weeks, 241 yards, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and where I'm most excited is on the ground. They allow 35 rushing yards per game and 3 rushing touchdowns. So similar to CJ Stroud, he could score on the ground, and Herbert is a underrated athlete. I think they will score a lot against the Bengals. It could be a massive shootout on Sunday night. So I trust him maybe more than the average person, but maybe not as much as Jim Harbaugh. I'm not going to go that far in my endorsement with Herbert, but he's been a lot more effective with no turnovers at all. I love his floor, and I think the ceiling is open this week. I think he's a valuable piece rest of season. His schedule is legit with Atlanta, Tampa Bay, and New England still left on the slate, along with Baltimore in week 12. I think he's a valuable piece rest of year. At worst, he should be your backup if he's on the wire. Grab him while you can. But at this point, he has been a trendy pickup. I ranked him top 10 last week, and it looks like I'm not the only one who does believe he's a good play. Number 10 is Bo Nix versus Atlanta, who probably is not on the radar for the average fan. But if you are paying attention, Bo Nix is very, very legit in fantasy. I ranked him top 13 last week, and at least in my scoring format, he was quarterback 11. I think it's legit. Bo Nix is quarterback 7 over the last 4 weeks. 19.1 points per game is on par with Justin Herbert. 222 yards per game, 5 touchdowns, 1 turnover, 28 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, and also 1 touchdown catch. Last week, he had -5 rushing yards, but on the season, he has 5 games with over 35 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns in 10 games if you count that touchdown catch as a touchdown run. So really high volume in the run game is what keeps Bo Nix so safe. And with very few turnovers, just like Justin Herbert, he is unlikely to burn you. And this matchup is a good one. The Falcons do rank top 8 over the last 5 games, giving up 19.6 points per game, 262 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, along with 20 rushing yards per game. So I think Bo Nix will flash that athleticism. He's not quite Drew Brees, but if Drew Brees was this good at running the football, then Brees would have been like a number 1 quarterback for like 5 straight years in fantasy. So I think Bo Nix is a top 10 play. I think as the weapons start to come back to this offense, Josh Reynolds is getting healthy. His upside is open a little bit more, but obviously it's going to take free agency and maybe some drafts in order to get good receivers on Denver. But Courtland Sutton is playing well. Devon Valley also stepping up. I don't think the weapons in Denver are that terrible. So I trust Bo Nix. I think Sean Payton really dialing up some good plays, and they aren't going to like fall flat just all of a sudden. They don't have a bye until week 14, so they got to keep rolling, keep up the momentum, and I do trust Bo Nix at number 10. I think he's a legit start, high-end floor play. I think he's guaranteed for 18 points in week 11. Number 11, I believe Geno Smith is also worth a start, at least as a streamer in this matchup against San Francisco. Typically, he doesn't play too well. He has a lot of turnovers. He is winless, never beaten the Niners in 5 career games against them. That includes a playoff matchup, and for some reason, they always force him to make mistakes. But off a bye, I do believe this Ryan Grubb offense will look even better than it has in the past, especially with DK Metcalf healthy. I believe Geno Smith will light it up and be competitive in this game. I think they will keep it to within a touchdown, and it will be high scoring by the Niners. I think Seattle can score 30 and still lose by maybe even 10 points. So Geno, I think, will be competitive. However, he probably turns it over, but he's the leading passer in terms of yards per game this season. Geno Smith averages 284 passing yards per game. So with a full bevy of weapons, especially Noah Fant on top of DK Metcalf, I do trust the floor. Kenneth Walker catches it a lot as well. So unless they mix up the game plan off the bye and just start giving Kenneth Walker a ton of rush attempts instead, I trust Geno. I think the receivers get going at a decent rate. So he's not quite top 10, but I think he's close. I think the floor is safe. I don't think he's going to have a terrible game against San Francisco, but he will lose. If you ask me, the Seahawks' chances at the playoffs hinge on this win, and it won't happen. Geno is fighting for his career, and he probably does not maintain the job after he loses his 6th straight against the Niners. In division, if you can't beat them, why keep him as the quarterback? So I think it's the end of the road, but he will put up a very tough fight rest of season. I think he does have some interesting fantasy appeal. Top 15 every week. This week at number 11, Geno Smith, a decent play. Number 12, I have Jared Goff versus Jacksonville, who could be elite. He could be a top 5 play this week, and I wouldn't be shocked at all. We've seen him put up 30 points in multiple games this season, but we've also seen him put up less than 100 yards in a 50-point win, and that could legitimately happen once again. He also threw 5 interceptions last week. That's kind of laughable, though. It's definitely not going to repeat, and odds are he does bounce back, but there's a chance they win by such a big blowout and all the touchdowns come on the ground that we hit the third quarter, he's benched, and he only has about 12, 14 fantasy points. That's what happened against the Titans a couple weeks ago. So against the Jags, they're going to put up a ton of points. I think he's a fine option, definitely a safe floor play, but in general, that's only good for about 14, 15 points most of the time, and you're hoping for the ceiling. If it hits, he could double it and give you 30, but if not, you might get burned, and last week he only gave you 10. With 5 interceptions, though, he would have scored 20 if you took them off of the stat line. So he obviously has upside. I think he's a fine play. If you have him, go ahead and start him as a fill-in for Kyler on the bye. You can start him in a typical 12-team league. That's what I'm saying. Start Jared Goff. But at number 13, I have Patrick Mahomes at Buffalo, and I previously did rank him below Jayden Daniels yesterday, but then I looked into these numbers, and I don't think I can do that. Obviously, Daniels wasn't great last night, but in Mahomes' last 5 games versus Buffalo, he treats this like a playoff environment. 22.6 points per game, 295 yards per game, 10 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and 36 rushing yards per game with 1 rushing touchdown. So I expect him to contribute on the ground. I think this could be a very low-scoring game, and that's where the risk factors in. Mahomes has not been insane this year, but I could also see a potential shootout, and against Buffalo, anything can happen. It will go back and forth, be toe-to-toe, and Mahomes will have to be engaged all game long. So with no Pacheco, I think they're not going to lean on the run as much yet. And Travis Kelce has really stepped up his game since the bye. So I do trust the floor a lot more. Mahomes is quarterback 11 the last 4 weeks. And although this matchup is difficult, the Bills force a lot of turnovers. I think he is a legit streamer. At number 13, I would still probably keep Mahomes in my lineup. Similar to Goff, there's not the highest ceiling ever. He hasn't been as good as you expected this season, but I still think the floor is decent. I think rest of season, as Kelce and Hopkins really get into a groove, I think he will trickle back in to the top 8, but I want to see it one more time before I fully endorse it. This is a bottom 7 matchup. Against Buffalo, they only give up 13.6 points per game on average, and that's not great. 7 touchdowns the last 5 games, and 8 quarterback turnovers, 6 picks, 2 fumbles. That could be a problem. We could see Mahomes turn it over multiple times this week. So at number 13, I'm not dying to start him, but he is in the streaming category. Odds are, if you have him, you'll probably keep him in the lineup. But I genuinely think that Russell Wilson, CJ Stroud, Justin Herbert, Bo Nixon, Geno Smith are better starts potentially off the waiver wire in your league. Number 14, I am bumping down Jayden Daniels 1 spot from yesterday's rank, but it's not that much different. I did tell you it was a tough matchup against Philly, and I did say, in quote, I would rather start Bo Nix than Jayden Daniels this week. So he did not pay off too well, only 1 passing touchdown, and his rushing stats have completely evaporated. Since that rib injury, he's not quite the same player, but it was the toughest matchup in the NFL. The Eagles defense is clearly a matchup to avoid. So I'm a bit worried about Daniels' rest of season. His next 2 matchups open up a bit with the Titans and Cowboys, but with a bye in week 14, then New Orleans, Philly, and Atlanta in the fantasy playoffs, I genuinely think you could consider dropping him as a potential landmine on the waiver wire. I'd probably just wait for the bye to do that, though. I think I'd rather keep him for those Titans and Cowboys matchups, and then let somebody take the risk with him in the playoffs. I don't think he's going to be great in week 16, especially when he gets the Eagles once again. So Daniels has not been great, and I did tell you he was not a clear top 10 play. I did still rank him a bit too high yesterday at 13. Number 15, though, I think is the bench territory at quarterback. I think it's a little too risky, but there is some high-end upside with all these quarterbacks. I am going to rank Jameis Winston at New Orleans here at number 15, and the Saints defense have caught 12 interceptions in 10 games this year. So Jameis could turn it over multiple times. We've seen that happen many occasion for him. Last time we saw him play, he also threw 3 interceptions right before the bye week. But they also allow 32 rushing yards per game in New Orleans, along with 249 passing yards per game the last 5 weeks. So Jameis can still have a nice day, even if he does have multiple interceptions. Off the bye, the receiving core could get in a nice rhythm with all 4 options. The 3 receivers have been pretty good. Njoku adds a nice cherry on top. So it's a great matchup for the running backs, but we know Nick Chubb is not quite the same player he once was. I do think Jameis is a dark horse candidate in fantasy this week. I really like his upside because I believe the Browns will win against the Saints. He's playing his former team, revenge game for Jameis, and Cedric Tillman, David Njoku, very great targets in the end zone. I do think they step up. Judy and Elijah Moore also move the chain. So I like Jameis Winston this week. While he's only played 2 games this season, he does rank as quarterback 12 in points per game in that small sample size, an average of 16.8 points per game. We saw him dominate the Ravens, the best matchup in the league. He was great, 334 yards and 3 touchdowns. His second game, he had 3 interceptions against a great defense in the Chargers. So the Saints are somewhere in between. While I am worried about the interceptions, I do see a very high ceiling if he does tap into that potential. So love Jameis this week. I think at number 15, he is worth a streaming consideration. Odds are, though, in a 1 quarterback league, I would be benching him most of the time. Beyond this point, you are probably desperate if you're considering them, or it's a 2 quarterback league, and super flex considerations are definitely in favor of rushing quarterbacks. So I have Anthony Richardson here at number 16. I was a big believer in him before the season, and obviously his season has not been quite what I expected, but he's back under center. It appears it's his job rest of season, and Joe Flacco is no longer a threat for snaps unless he takes him out of the game. But I think he learned his lesson. I don't think that happens again. And since firing Robert Saleh, the Jets defense doesn't scare me at all in fantasy. On the season, it still ranks bottom 4 against the quarterback position, but in the last 5 games, it is a top 4 matchup. The Jets give up 21.9 points per game, only 218 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, but not a single interception. They do not catch interceptions at all. And on top of that, they're very vulnerable on the ground. 32 rushing yards per game and 5 rushing touchdowns. We know that is Richardson's specialty. So I genuinely think I might be ranking him too low this week at number 16, but obviously the recent risk with him is a big red flag. I don't think this matchup, though, should scare you. So at 16, I think Richardson has a massive upside this week. I think it could look like week 1 where he put up 29 points, at least in my scoring format, against the Texans. I think he will give you at least 50 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, and that's going to give him a very safe floor. Maybe he only throws for like 100 yards and 2 interceptions, no touchdowns, but I do trust at least 12 points just on rushing from Richardson this week. So start him in Superflex formats. If you are desperate, I think you could pivot, but I think I'd rather go Jameis, in all honesty, off the wire. Number 17, I have Drake May versus the Rams, who also offers some high-end rushing value. He does average just under 50 rushing yards per game this season, but last week he was held in check in that department. I think it does come back to him most likely. However, the Rams are a bad matchup. Last 5 games ranked bottom 8, only giving up 13.8 points per game, with 8 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. In that span, I do worry that May will turn it over quite a bit, but they also give up 248 passing yards, so I think he will move the ball, and it's probably going to be a closer game given the Rams have to travel off a short week, play at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time in Massachusetts. So I do think Drake May has some upside this week, but I don't love the matchup enough to fully endorse. I think he has higher upside rest of season in a few better spots, but his rest of season schedule is actually very difficult. And while I am enticed with his rushing value, I still worry about his rookie mistakes capping the upside. So this week is kind of emblematic. At number 17, you could consider him, but odds are I'd rather bench him. In a 2 quarterback format, though, I would start Drake May. I'd expect about 16 or so points from him this week. I also think that's the floor I'm projecting for Aaron Rodgers versus the Colts. It is not a matchup that scares me. On the season, they've been a very good spot for opposing quarterbacks. In the last 5 games, they do rank number 19. They've been a bit better, but they also give up 280 plus passing yards in every game the last 3 weeks. So with 4 passing touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and 2 fumbles in that span, I do think Rodgers and the Jets will look better against this opponent. The Colts don't scare me enough to write them off entirely, but obviously they looked like shit against the Cardinals last week, and it could happen again. There is some high risk with the Jets in general, but if Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams can catch some touchdowns, if Breece Hall can also get going in the passing game, then Rodgers can always pad the stats. If he goes over 300 passing yards, I wouldn't be shocked at all this week. So I do think the floor is decent. I think he doesn't turn it over as much. I think he also provides roughly 16 points this week. But moving forward, I think 15 to 14 is kind of the floor I'm expecting. Sam Darnold does not feel like the safest bet, even against the Titans, who are very banged up in the secondary. Their safety and cornerback are on IR. L'Jarius Sneed has also missed 5 straight games as well. So they don't scare you at all. Justin Jefferson could go off with TJ Hawkinson back. The floor is there for Darnold, but he threw 3 interceptions against the Jaguars, which are not a tough matchup at all, and that's a big problem for Darnold. Interceptions have been a trend for him in his career. So I would worry about it. I don't think he has the highest ceiling, but there's still a ton of upside in this offense. It could happen where he puts up like 350 yards, 4 touchdowns. I am waiting for that to happen. At some point, I think it will hit. But given some of his struggles, we know for a fact he's not quite Kirk Cousins, and I do worry that the floor just isn't there for Darnold. So too much risk. While it is interesting, I'd rather avoid it. At QB 19, I think I'll pass on Darnold, but the matchup doesn't scare me. At number 20, the matchup is a bit scary, though, for Kirk Cousins at Denver, and it's the last game before the bye. There's a chance that they are a bit exhausted, and if the game gets a bit out of hand, they could check out in the second half and just move on to the bye week. There's a lot of mistakes to clean up, because if you look at Kirk Cousins' season, if you remove the 2 games against Tampa where he was elite, averaged 393 yards, 8 touchdowns, only 1 interception in those 2 games, he's been pretty bad. He only averages like 11.5 points in the other 8 games. So it's not safe with Cousins. Last week, I had him ranked poorly as well. And at QB 20, I don't think he's a safe play at all. He's been tied with Darnold for 15 fantasy points the last 4 games. And that includes one of those games against Tampa. So I really worry about this Broncos matchup. They're bottom 5 against the quarterback position this season, but in the last 5 games, they have been league average. So maybe it's not as big of a deal as I'm worried about, but I just rather avoid it. Kirk Cousins has been so volatile, and if it's not against Tampa, he's kind of sucked. So I'm going to ignore him. I think he will play well after the bye. I love the schedule rest of season, but this week, I think he's worth benching. Maybe drop him, given the bye week is probably not something you can handle on the bench. So good luck with Cousins. I'd rather bench him in a 2 quarterback league at number 20 with 4 teams on bye. Maybe you'll start him. But Matthew Stafford, I think, is only good for about 14, 15 points as well. The Rams offense really disappointed last week, and if Stafford doesn't throw touchdowns, then you can get 300 yards, and it doesn't matter. So while I do think they bounce back a little bit, they have to travel cross country on a short week. Playing in the morning, I really hate this spot for them to be elite. So desperate situation means I think he's okay, but I don't think he's going to be fantastic. I think he averages 14 points for a reason. That's what he offers this week. He is not a safe play at number 21. I would rather bench Matthew Stafford. I'd also rather bench Tua Tagovailoa. You'd think this is an elite matchup, but even though they're top 10 against quarterbacks, it's not thanks to yards. They only give up 204 yards per game the last 5 weeks. And with 9 touchdowns, that's really the only saving grace. 3 interceptions maybe looks more difficult. Off the bye, they might have a better defense dialed up from Antonio Pierce. So I do worry about it. Tua gives you nothing on the ground, and if these stats hold, then the yardage allowed makes Tua very touchdown dependent this week. And maybe he throws another 2 touchdowns. That sometimes happens, but last week Malik Washington had a rushing touchdown, and I really trust Tua for multiple scores in general. So I'd rather pass. There's also the threat of him missing time with the concussion again. If he continues to tackle the corner who just picked him off, I don't think he'll play that many seasons in his career. So I do worry about Tua all of the time. Start him at your own risk, but at 22, I'm telling you to bench him. These last names I think are very, very untrustworthy, but Derek Carr does have a good matchup here. The Browns do rank top 6 the last 5 games. He had a top 7 matchup last week, and it paid off. Maybe I am discrediting him too much, but his only receiver is MVS other than Kamara. That's the only guy that offers anything of upside. And while he does actually throw the deep ball very well, I don't trust Derek Carr. Starting him feels like a trap, and I'm just going to pass. Even though the matchup's good, I think it's just wasted on the Saints offense. With no Olave or Shaheed, I will ignore Derek Carr once again. But maybe you're willing to take that gamble. If you're desperate enough, this matchup suggests he should have a decent floor. They allow 21.9 points per game the last 5 weeks, 250 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, 1 interception. Start him at your own risk. At 24, same applies with Caleb Williams, who obviously has some upside. We've seen him play very well in stretches this season, but I am no longer a believer. I am done actually trusting the Bears, and against a division rival, the Packers, off a bye. even though they filed Shane Waldron and that will help him rest of season, I really don't trust him at all. I need to see it before I trust Caleb. So he has no interceptions lately, but way too many sacks, and that's a big problem in itself. I have no faith. I will bench Caleb once again. Versus Green Bay, no chance. He needs to prove that you can trust him. This week, I will keep him on the waiver wire. Number 25, I think, is the fuck no territory. I think there's a chance that we see Trey Lance in this matchup. We saw him last week against the Eagles, and against Houston, it's not an easy matchup either. Cooper Rush is not a safe quarterback at all. So I do think CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson keep his floor interesting. The matchup's not as bad as it was against Philly, but still, it's not good. And obviously, if they pivot to Lance, you will get screwed. So definitely keep him on the bench. At this point, you're asking to lose with these quarterbacks. Same applies with Mac Jones at Detroit. I doubt he gets benched, but it is possible given he's a backup. We might see the third stringer. That'd be very embarrassing. And Detroit will be in a blowout environment. Maybe in the fourth quarter, the lead is too big. They just cut their losses with Mac Jones. So he's going to struggle. The Lions have really stepped it up on defense. And after a close come from behind win, I don't think they take any chances. They won't give up the same amount of points they gave up to the Titans a couple weeks ago. So do not start Mac Jones. No chance in hell. He had a rushing touchdown last week and still finished with only 5.2 points. The touchdown's worth 6. That's all you need to know. Don't start Mac Jones. Number 27 would be Gardner Minshew at Miami, and they were legitimately thinking about starting Desmond Ridder all throughout the bye week and up until Wednesday, so they could still pivot to Ridder mid-game. Don't start Minshew. He has no upside. They shut down the Rams in LA last week. I think their defense is starting to get on track. I don't trust Minshew at all. And I'm definitely not starting Will Levis against the Vikings. Literally, Brian Flores might end Will Levis's career. I could see 5 turnovers against the Vikings, the toughest defense in the NFL. So no chance in hell would I start Will Levis, but we could see Mason Rudolph. So he's at number 29. And as I mentioned, we could say Trey Lance as well. So he's at number 30. Lance is interesting if he ever gets the start. His rushing value does give him an elite ceiling, but obviously a lack of floor entirely. Let's move on to tight end. I'm already way slower than I want to be on this video, so let's get it going. We have 4 tight ends on bye. Cade Otton, Trey McBride, Jatavian Sanders, and Theo Johnson. You can't start any of them. Otton and McBride are elite. Sanders and Theo Johnson, no one really cares. But Dalton Kincaid is out. He's already been ruled out for this game, so an upgrade to Dawson Knox. We'll mention him in this video. And Sam Laporta, very unlikely to play. I'm not ranking him at the moment. He did not practice at all this week. They definitely don't need him in order to beat the Jaguars. So didn't rank him. Maybe I'll update this on Saturday after we get some more clarity, but I really do not expect Laporta on the field. Let's get going. At number 1, I'm ranking Travis Kelce as the best option this week at Buffalo. Holy shit, he plays well in history. Last 5 games versus the Bills, an average of 16.5 points per game. 9 targets, 6.6 catches, 84 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Looks very similar to what he's done the last 3 games. Kelce is back. He's back to elite. Last 3 weeks, an average of 17.9 points, 13.3 targets, 10.7 catches, 85 yards, and 2 touchdowns. At least 12 targets in each of those games. So, holy shit, Travis Kelce is back, and we doubted him for too long. He has returned to elite status. I'm a little worried that the volume goes away from him in December. We know they're going to ramp him up for the playoffs and make sure he's healthy for January. But this is a playoff environment, and one of the matchups I know for a fact they will not limit his snaps. So love Kelce this week. Definitely a stud. And given his target share, I think he would be the clear number 1 this week. At number 2, I was tempted to put Kittle at number 1, but he is questionable, dealing with a hamstring injury. Did not practice on Wednesday, but was limited on Thursday. I do think he plays. I'm not worried about him missing time, but I do expect a very good game for Debo, who's always great against the Seahawks. McCaffrey's also always elite against Seattle as well. And maybe the volume is not anywhere near as high as Kelce. That's kind of the case with Kittle. He can be the tight end 1 on any given week on just 3 catches. But this week, I do think the floor is a bit higher for Kelce. Kittle's still elite. No one's benching him, but that's the tiebreaker for me. I expect more targets and catches to go Kelce's way. Kittle should still be elite. He has 7 touchdowns in 8 games, and he's been by far the best tight end on the season. But In week 11, I would prefer Kelce, a slight tiebreaker between the two. At number 3, I think Mark Andrews is a clear must start at this point. Slow start to the year, but off that car accident, maybe he was just sore. Last 4 games, he has 4 touchdowns, 5 in 5 games, and an average of 12.4 points is safe. While he's not great in terms of volume, only 4.5 targets, he's catching almost every single one of those, 4.3 catches for 43 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's the tight end 5 in the last 4 games. So I trust him for sure. Definitely expect him to pay off. Against the Steelers, though, I will mention he does not have a single touchdown in his 9-game career sample size versus Pittsburgh. But despite no touchdowns, he's still very safe, an average of 9.8 targets, 5.8 catches, 63 yards. That's 9.2 points with no touchdowns. So trust the floor for sure. Andrews probably snaps that lack of touchdown streak. And I think in the 10th game, I do think he finds pay dirt. So definitely start him with 5 touchdowns the last 5 games. You cannot bench Mark Andrews. At number 4, I think we dropped down a tier slightly, but Brock Bowers is still an elite must-start option, but I don't trust him to score touchdowns. He only has 1 on the season. So despite the most targets of almost any tight end before the bye, he did hold that rank. During the bye, Travis Kelce did take it away from him in terms of most catches in the NFL. I think they will probably have a in-division rivalry going back and forth between the two rest of season. So I expect a extremely high floor from Bowers. Even as a rookie, that's what he's offered in his last 4 games, averaging 11.8 points per game, 9.3 targets, 7.3 catches, 67 yards. But as I mentioned, only 1 touchdown in that sample size. So he's been elite. The floor is bust proof. He's clearly the best option in that offense. And off the bye, he probably gets even more targets, is even more involved in that offense. But at the end of the day, Gardner Minshew's his quarterback, and we might even get the pivot to Desmond Ridder. That would be a nightmare scenario. So that's what holds him back. He's not in the same tier as Kelce, Kittle, or Andrews. But at number 4, you are starting Brock Bowers. You're also starting TJ Hockenson at Tennessee. First week back, they slow played him. He was a bit more of a decoy. And Josh Oliver did dominate as the other tight end. He was left wide open. But in the second game, TJ Hockenson was unleashed. His targets increased from 4 up to 9. He had 8 catches, 72 yards against the Jags. But Darnold isn't as good as Cousins, so touchdowns will be very limited in this offense. And similar to Bowers, that's what will hold back Hockenson from the elite top 2. But last season, he was a top 2 tight end as well, and I do think he's earned some trust. Now that the volume already is there, I trust him to be at worst top 7 rest of season. But with Otton and McBride on bye, here he is at number 5. Definitely a must start. I think Hockenson will be a go-to target every week for Darnold. He's behind Jefferson, but I do think he's above Addison. He is the number 2 target on this offense. In some weeks, he will get more targets than Jefferson, like we saw last week. I think rest of season, he does have that league-winning potential. Hockenson is in the upper echelon of tight ends you need rest of season. At number 6, I have Kyle Pitts at Denver, but it's a pretty steep drop off in terms of tiers from Hockenson at 5 to Pitts at number 6. But Pitts has been decent, tight end 8 over the last 4 games, averaging 10.6 points per game, 8.8 targets, 6.3 catches, 56 yards per game, but 2 touchdowns that happened on National Tight End Day. So never expecting tight ends to touchdowns to really hit for Pitts, but in his last 8 games, he has at least 55 yards in 6 of them. But when it doesn't happen, he gives you close to a bagel. So it is boom bust with Pitts, but the floor is generally pretty high. And I do think with Surtain on London, he will need to contribute a lot this week against Denver. So I think he's a clear top 10 play this week. I think the floor is one of the highest rest of the way. In the rankings, it's hard to find a safer bet than Pitts. And it's not like he's the safest bet in general. That's just saying something about the state of the position the rest of the way in the rankings. Number 7, I'm chasing upside. I'm going with Tucker Kraft at Chicago. And even off the bye, Luke Musgrave remains on IR. So Kraft will continue to be the tight end 1 in Green Bay. And he remains one of the league leaders in touchdowns at the position. He's tied with Mark Andrews with 5 touchdowns in the last 6 games since Musgrave went down. So I like the blowout potential for the Packers off the bye this week against a team they historically dominate. I think you should start Tucker Kraft and hope for that touchdown. This week, that touchdown upside is there. He rarely has more than 3 catches in a game, but occasionally he does have over 60 yards receiving, and his targets have a lot of value attached to them. So especially in the red zone, that's where Love often looks for him. I would continue to start Tucker Kraft this week. I think he gives you at least 8 points. That's what he's averaged, 8.5 the last 4 games, thanks to 2 touchdowns. So chase that upside. I think Tucker Kraft is one of the last tight ends I think is safe to project a touchdown for in week 11. At number 8, I think we're chasing the floor with Hunter Henry, though. Versus the Rams, it is a pretty decent matchup. They rank top 7 over the last 5 games, giving up 12.7 points per game, 64 yards per game to the position, along with 3 touchdowns. Henry could bounce back. Last week, I apologize, he was bad, but obviously any tight end can burn you at any point in time. But he still had 4 targets, 1 catch for 14 yards. Terrible in fantasy, but why I'm not panicking is because Austin Hooper had 3 catches for 64 yards. Obviously, it went to the wrong player, but it is a good sign. The Patriots continue to use tight ends at a consistently high rate in this offense. So none of the receivers are safe, but the bar is lowered for tight end that Hunter Henry is the best option. In fantasy, I still trust him as Drake May's top option. So while this is a bit of a prove it game, if he sucks again, I'm not going to rank him top 10 again. I do still think Henry can offer some upside. As I mentioned, the matchup is good, and he is still a top 10 tight end. The last 4 games, averaging 10.2 points on 7 targets, 5.8 catches, 59 yards, and only 1 touchdown. The floor is genuinely pretty high for Henry most of the time. I think 8 points is typically what he should be offering. So I'm going to start him one more time. If he sucks, I'll bench him. I'll stop endorsing him. But as someone who rosters him in the subscriber league, I will start him. I think he's a top 10 play this week. I trust the floor. I think those stats for Hooper come back to him this week. At number 9, I have David Njoku at New Orleans, who I'm tempted to rank a lot higher because he is the tight end 7 the last 4 weeks, averaging 11.1 points per game. But these stats are slightly misleading. 8.8 targets, 6.3 catches, 49 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I think is a little bit optimistic of a projection, because if you look at the last 4 games, while he does have a minimum of 7 targets in all of them, 1 of them he has 14, the other 3 he has 7 in each. So I only expect 7 targets for Njoku, and at the moment he's averaging 7.9 yards per catch over the last month. So that is the big downside. Even if he does have like 5 catches in a game, he's not a safe bet to go over 35 yards. So I worry about Njoku. I really think the ceiling is diminished. He's very touchdown dependent. And at that point, I think I'd rather trust the floor with Henry. I think you're getting a similar value proposition with both players. So I think he's top 10. I would still start Njoku, but I don't expect the best game of the week from him. At number 9, I think he's more of a floor play. You probably don't get more than 8 points from Njoku this week. But at number 10, I did rank Goddard at number 12 yesterday, but that was before I knew that Kincaid and Laporta are unlikely to play. So that's why he moves up 2 spots, only because those players get taken out. But I did tell you he was worth streaming yesterday. He caught 5 for 61, and that's about 8.5 points. So kind of in the same vein of my projection for Njoku and Henry, who also moved up 2 spots as Laporta and Kincaid were taken out. So I think he's going to do exactly what I expected, roughly tight end 10 to 12 this week. But Zach Ertz, I mentioned, was one of my more compelling flex options this week, a more interesting streamer because of the revenge game narrative. And also the matchup was bad for Terry McLaurin. They had no other receivers other than Eckler in this game, basically, and Ertz did pay off. It was kind of garbage time, but a touchdown counts no matter what. So with 6 catches, 47 yards, and a touchdown, Ertz was a very good play. I did rank him at 13 yesterday, but like I mentioned, moves up 2 spots with no Laporta or Kincaid. I did have him right behind Dallas Goedert. So good game from Zach Ertz, probably his best game on the season. Number 12 is Dawson Knox, who I'm also expecting his best game of the year versus the Chiefs. He has very sneaky upside in this rivalry game with all the injuries in Buffalo. Dalton Kincaid is already ruled out, so is Keon Coleman, and Amari Cooper is a game time decision, probably suits up, but not guaranteed. So without a lot of chemistry and practice time in this offense, I think Dawson Knox will be needed to step up. And this is a very important game. The Chiefs have also allowed the second most fantasy points to tight ends all season, 13.1 points per game, 6.7 catches, 78 yards per game, and 3 touchdowns on the year. I think Knox has massive upside this week. I think he could offer 15 plus points with like 80 yards and a touchdown. They definitely need him a lot. And they also pay him a lot. Before they drafted Kincaid, they gave him like a top 10 contract at the time, and this is the spot where he needs to step up. So as long as he's healthy, which it appears that that is the case, I think Dawson Knox is a very legit play. I think I could rank him honestly above Kyle Pitts at number 6. I was tempted to do that, but at number 12, I think he's in a similar tier, honestly. But I think if you're willing to start Taysom Hill, why not be willing to start Dawson Knox? Equally high upside, excellent matchup, and you know they need him to step up. So at tight end 12, I would consider starting him. He's a legit streamer this week. Number 13, as I mentioned, if you're desperate, why not go with Taysom Hill, who is a decent bet to score a touchdown. The matchup's not bad against the Browns on the ground. They have given up about 5 rushing touchdowns the last 5 games. So Taysom could capitalize. We know he has a role on the goal line, and in his last 5 games, he is the tight end 11, averaging 9.9 points per game, thanks to 3 touchdowns. He has 5.3 opportunities per game. That includes rush attempts as well as targets. 2 catches, 44 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's more of a running back than a tight end, but you can start him at this position. He's a bit of a cheat code. Go ahead and plug him in if you need to. I'd rather go Dawson Knox, though, who is definitely more available on the wire. At 14, I have Evan Ingram at Detroit, who I think is an interesting floor play, but nothing other than that. I have no confidence in the touchdown production with Mac Jones at quarterback. Maybe T-Law comes back after the bye, but with no Christian Kirk, the volume should still be there with Mac Jones for Evan Ingram. Last week, he was the leader in targets with 8 of them. He caught 6 for 40 yards, and that is check down Charlie. He's kind of like Njoku, but in a worse offense. I have lesser expectations for Ingram. So if all you want is 7 points, go ahead. That's what he had last week, and I envision a similar floor for him, but no upside. I have no faith he scores a touchdown. Number 15, I have Jonnu Smith versus Las Vegas, who's actually a very safe floor play. Tight end 12 over the last 4 games, averaging 9.1 points per game. I think if you need a backup, if you need a handcuff to Cade Otton this week, go ahead and start him. If you lost Kincaid or Laporta, Jonnu is not the worst option. He averages 9.1 points per game the last 4 games, 5.8 targets, 4.8 catches, 52 yards per game, and 1 touchdown. Honestly, you would die for those numbers from Jalen Waddle. His production is a big reason why both Waddle and Tyreek Hill have been so bad this season, and I do think it will continue. It appears he's a focal point of this offense, definitely consistent, and he's most often the number 3 target behind Tyreek Hill and Devon Achane, above Waddle in terms of target share. So I think Jonnu is a safe floor play. While I don't expect much from him, very few touchdowns in this passing game, I do think at number 15, you could start him in a jam. The floor is probably good for another 7 points, just like Ingram this week. Number 16, though, I think at this point we are just chasing upside, and why not go with the most athletic tight end you can find? Cole Kmet should be more involved in this offense, and they fired Shane Waldron, so it's possible they make the big pivot towards Kmet. I do think he offers some upside rest of season because Kmet has gone very uninvolved since the bye. He has 2.5 targets per game the last 4 games, and that includes 2 touchdowns in that London matchup previous to the bye. So that's the only saving grace for him. He's very athletic. He could have the highest upside of any tight end any given week. I could envision like 80 yards and 2 touchdowns for Kmet at any time. But if they are smart, they will start to get him more involved. I think they should stop using Keenan Allen at such a high rate and send those targets to Cole Kmet. He's one of their best weapons. I like him a lot. I think if they know what's good for them, they will get him involved. And I would be trying to acquire him, whether it's via trade or off the waiver wire. Kmet is interesting. Definitely a good athlete to stash on the bench. But until we see it, he's been too risky lately. I would bench him at this point at number 16. You are pretty desperate if you're starting Kmet. Number 17 is Mike Gesicki at the Chargers, who did not pay off last week. Tanner Hudson vultured his touchdowns, and his success this year is highly correlated to T. Higgins missing time. And T. Higgins is likely to suit up on Sunday night. They are expecting him to play, and that craters the value for Gesicki. But he still plays with Burrow. It's a high-flying offense, and there is still some value. I wouldn't completely write him off, but at 17, I think he is droppable at this point. With Higgins healthy, I don't think I would start him with any confidence. At 18, I think it's the last week to hold out hope on Jake Ferguson versus Houston. He still has no touchdowns on the season, and that's probably not going to change with Cooper Rush at quarterback. I have very little faith, but I don't think he's going to be completely uninvolved. Obviously, the ceiling is a lot lower without Dak Prescott. So if you want to drop him already, go ahead, but I'm giving him one more week before I completely lose all confidence. I still think he's going to see a decent target share as the number 2 target behind CeeDee Lamb. There's just no other weapons, and the matchup was terrible against the Eagles. It should be a little better against the Texans, but not by much. So I am worried. I wouldn't start Ferguson at all. Last week was way too awful to have any confidence in that this week, but there is a chance he's still somewhat decent. I think he could creep back up to like Jonnu Smith, Evan Ingram territory, but at that point, you might as well just cut him. So at 18, no thank you. I'm not starting Ferguson this week, but I have a slight sliver of hope left for Ferguson in my sights. At number 19, I have Will Dissly versus Cincinnati, who has a similar floor to Ferguson, also averaging about 6.4 points the last 4 games. And while he rarely scores touchdowns, sometimes Herbert trusts him more than some of the receivers. He's often the number 2 target in this offense. So similar to Ferguson and Gesicki, I think there is a floor that you can chase after with Dissly, but at this point, there's no sex appeal to starting him. It's pretty gross to enter him into the lineup, so I really doubt most people are even considering to pick him up off the wire. But at number 20, I think there is some upside for Brock Wright versus the Jaguars. With no Laporta, he could score a touchdown. We saw him do that against the Titans in that 50-point blowout, and Laporta was active in that game. So he's the tight end 1. Maybe in garbage time, they pull most of the starters, and he draws most of the targets. So we'll see what happens. Maybe Hendon Hooker gets him multiple touchdowns. Number 21 through 25 are not startable, but definitely kind of interesting. There is some appeal, honestly, but I wouldn't be starting Noah Fant or Freiermuth Schultz, Juwan Johnson, or Tyler Conklin. They're just not safe enough in terms of volume, but Fant does have 3 games in the last 6 with over 60 yards. Maybe he steps up, but off injury, I'm not ready to trust him. No touchdowns this season, so no thank you. Freiermuth, even with a touchdown, is not safe at all, only giving you about 26 yards per game the last 4. Schultz gets a revenge game, so maybe like Zach Ertz, he scores a touchdown, but other than last week, he's done nothing. However, last week he finally stepped up. He did have 66 yards, and that's kind of Noah Fant territory as well. But Juwan Johnson, one of the few targets in this offense, needs to step up, but has not stepped up in any significant way. I'll pass. And then Conklin, extremely touchdown dependent. Without it, you probably get only 1 point. No thanks with him. And then lastly, let's talk defenses. Let's try and be fast. I think I'm over an hour already, so let's fucking go. The Vikings at Tennessee. Brian Flores might literally end Will Levis's career. I envision 4 turnovers available for Minnesota. One of them could be a pick 6. Number 2, Lions versus Jacksonville, the most obvious blowout of the week. The Lions defense shut out the Texans in the second half. They probably shut out Jacksonville in 3 quarters this week. Number 3, I have the Dolphins versus Las Vegas, and Miami looked great against the Rams on Monday, and the Raiders contemplated starting Desmond Ridder, so before they change their mind, that's the state of the position. Gardner Minshew is a great matchup for any opposing defense. Number 4, I got the Texans at Dallas, and with the backup quarterback, you definitely trust any opponent, but the Texans also looked really good. They caught 5 interceptions on Jared Goff last week, who was historically accurate entering that game. So Cooper Rush probably gets benched for Trey Lance. I think the Texans are a safe top 5 play. At 5, I think the Packers are also a must-start top 5 play. The Packers rank 2nd in the NFL in takeaways this season, tied with the Buffalo Bills in 1 less game with 19 total, only behind the Vikings, who have 20 in 9 games themselves. So they have owned the Bears for decades. It'll happen again. Caleb is a rookie, even with a new offensive coordinator, is still a matchup to chase. I do think the Packers are a must-start. I see blowout potential for them this week. At number 6, I trust the Rams at New England as a top 10 play. I'm a bit concerned that they played on Monday, now have to travel cross country to play at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, but off that loss in a must-win situation against a rookie quarterback with a defense that has a great pass rush, I think they will capitalize. I see some sacks and turnovers for Drake May. So going to be an ugly game. I think it's a low score. I think the floor is very high and the ceiling is open. The Rams are top 10 this week, but I do wish I ranked them below the Eagles. Last night, I did tell you the Eagles were a top 7 start. I did tell you they were good, and their defense looks like one of the best in the NFL. I think they've earned must-start status. Rest of season, I think they're going to be ranked top 5, no matter what, regardless of matchup. Every divisional matchup is also a pretty good one. Number 8, I have the Broncos versus Atlanta, and given it's the last week before the Falcons bye, there's a chance that they give up if they just don't have it in the first half, and I could see the Broncos really shut them down. They played lights out against the Chiefs. Now they know they can compete against anyone, and I do see them holding Atlanta to under 20 points. That's what they've done most of the time this season, so high floor with the Broncos this year. I would keep them in the lineup. Number 9, I got the Browns at New Orleans, and Saints got a nice win last week, but only because Younghoe Koo missed 2 field goals. The Browns are off a bye, and I do think that Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward really step up their game against Derek Carr. I see some turnovers. Maybe Kamara goes completely nuclear, but that's really the only risk I can think of. I trust their floor, even on the road, against New Orleans. At number 10, I have the Chiefs at Buffalo, followed by the Bills versus Kansas City. Back-to-back in the same game. I see a very tight one. I think both defenses are legit, and this is going to be a very tight game. With all the injuries, I think it's more of a low-scoring matchup, rather like a 24-23 grind-it-out type of game than like a 35-38 shootout victory. So similar to every Chiefs game this season, I believe the Chiefs have the best defense in the league and will keep the Bills in check. At worst, they're a top 3 unit this season, and they will show up again. They find a way to win, and with the injuries to the Bills offense, I don't think Josh Allen will go completely nuclear in the passing game, maybe on the ground, but he's thrown 4 interceptions the last 3 games. He will turn it over. Again, I think the Chiefs are the better play. I have them winning, so that's the tiebreaker. But like I mentioned with the Packers, the Bills are tied for 2nd in the NFL with the most takeaways this season, and they should keep it close. I think they're a top 12 play once again against the Chiefs. Number 12, I think the Steelers are still worth a start. I do think they win, and Mike Tomlin is 7-1 versus Baltimore in the last 8 games, the last 4 years. So none of those games go over 20 points on the scoreboard. I understand the Ravens have a top 3 offense this season, but this is going to be a typical rivalry game between Pittsburgh and Baltimore. It always ends in like a 20-17 type of score. So I still trust them. They have an elite unit this season, and they always step up in division. They will play well. While they're not the best start this week, I still think the floor is high, and they might score on defense. They might need to in order to win. They've earned my respect. I'm still telling you to start the Steelers in a 12-team format, but I understand if you think I'm crazy. Don't drop them. Whatever you do, do not drop Pittsburgh if you have them in fantasy. At 13, I got the Chargers versus the Bengals, and Chargers defense is elite statistically, but they haven't beaten anyone legit, so maybe you don't buy into it. And this will be their toughest test since that Chiefs game, maybe their toughest test in terms of offensive firepower overall. With T. Higgins active, I do worry about it a little bit. There is a chance it turns into a shootout with that Bengals offense, especially rested off of last week's Thursday game. But similar to the Steelers, I've trusted the Chargers this season to remain a top high-end floor, and I think that happens. I don't think the Bengals score more than 25, so that's my expectation. The Chargers remain top 13 and gut out this win. On defense, they have been really good. Number 14, I have the Saints versus Cleveland, and it's really just the Jameis Winston interception potential that has me tempted, but other than that, I think last week may have been a fluke. I really don't think they're going to win many more games this season, so I don't really trust them, but obviously if Jameis turns it over 3 times, there is pick 6 potential, and that's the only reason I have them in the low-end start consideration. But at 14, you got to be in a deep format. I think they're probably still on the waiver wire, and odds are I would pass. At 15, I think I'd also pass on the Falcons at Denver, but one of the last defenses I would consider. Broncos offense is not good enough to really worry about, but they're also underrated enough, and Atlanta is not good enough for me to endorse the Falcons on the road right before that bye. They could kind of check out early if the game is not competitive at halftime. So unless the running backs fumble, I doubt there's many turnovers. I don't see much upside for the Falcons, but probably a decent floor. Denver probably doesn't score more than 24. At 16 and 17, back-to-back, I have the Colts and Jets in the same game, and this is a very strange matchup between the two. It could be a 15-14 type of game, or genuinely a 38-33 type of shootout. I'll avoid it because I really don't know which one will happen. Neither defense has played well. Colts are getting better, but not great on the year. And the Jets have been terrible without Robert Saleh as coach. So I think they only get worse as more people give up as the losses pile up. I think the Colts win, and the Jets are not safe in fantasy at all rest of season. At number 18, I have the Patriots versus the Rams, and the Rams have to travel on a short week and play at 10 a.m. Pacific time, so I don't think their offense completely dominates, but the threat of that keeps the Pats unstartable in my opinion. But they're not far from the cutoff point. I don't think they burn you, but I doubt they have 10-point upside. Number 49, I have the Niners versus Seattle, and the Niners own this matchup and will win, but Seattle offense off a bye is probably a tough spot. It's the second matchup of the year, and I do think they get rolling. Some of those touchdowns that didn't hit last time to DK Metcalf will this time around. So I think the floor is pretty low for the Niners, but obviously they own this matchup. So maybe, just maybe, Staley's defense does step up. I'd rather bench San Francisco this week. At 20, I'm also benching the Bengals at the Chargers. The offense is not elite. Obviously, the Chargers don't scare you that much, but they are good enough to go back and forth with the Bengals, and they also do not turn it over at all. Herbert has no interceptions or fumbles the last 4 games, so not expecting more than 1 takeaway this season. The Chargers rank dead last, the fewest giveaways in the NFL. So Bengals don't have a good matchup on paper here. I don't think they're that good, even if the Chargers don't play well on offense. Number 21, I have the Ravens at Pittsburgh, and the Ravens secondary is just so bad this year. I think the rivalry game probably means they step up a bit, so they're not awful, not the worst start you could find, but I don't trust them at all. I think Russ and Pickens could torch them, and you get burned on defense. Titans versus Minnesota, no chance with all the injuries in the secondary. L'Jarius Sneed, Awuzie, and Quandre Diggs are all out once again. No thank you with Tennessee, but Darnold could turn it over. It is possible that the Titans have some upside. I would rather avoid it if I can. And then at this point, it's the fuck no territory. Cowboys versus Houston. Only if Deron Bland comes back is there any chance, but with Nico Collins back, no thank you at all. At 24, the Raiders at the Dolphins. Dolphins are still lacking on offense a bit, but this game is in Miami. Maybe they turn it around. No thanks as well. Number 25, I have the Bears versus the Packers, and Chicago plays better on defense at home, but off the bye, Jordan Love should clean up the mistakes. I have no faith in Chicago anymore, and even when I did, I thought they would lose this game badly in the first place. So no chance with Chicago. At 26, the Commanders are not going to be in your lineup at all. I told you to bench them. 27, the Seahawks at San Francisco. No chance in hell. The Niners are going to drop 40 probably. And then at 28, the Jags at Detroit. You are asking to lose. I would expect about -6 points from Jacksonville, maybe even less. That's kind of a best case scenario against the Lions. So that's it for this video. It ran very long. I think this is my first hour-plus video of the year. And here are the top 20 rankings at all 3 positions. So I'm just going to let you pause it. I do have the lines to demonstrate the tiers at all 3 positions, but go ahead and ask me in the comment section if you have any questions remaining. But that's going to be it for me. My name is Adam Riancho. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time with all my rankings, updates, and injury report on Saturday. Subscribe if you don't want to miss out. I'll see ya. Good luck. My name's Adam Riancho. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.